Somewhere right now, there's a woman sitting alone at 1 a.m., wide awake, mind racing, and she thinks something is wrong with her. There's a woman who talks to herself in an empty apartment and immediately feels embarrassed when she catches herself doing it. There's a woman whose desk looks like a disaster zone, who's been called too much for asking one more question, who's been told to just relax and stop overthinking it. And here's the strange part. Psychology has been studying people like her for decades. And what researchers keep finding is this. The habits we've been taught to see as flaws, messy, distracted, distant, awake at odd hours, are, in study after study, linked to one thing: higher cognitive ability. Today I'm going to walk you through 10 of these habits, one at a time, with the actual research behind each one. And I promise you, by the time we get to number 7, you're going to think about somebody in your life completely differently, maybe even yourself. Let's get into it. Here's the thing nobody tells you about intelligence. It was never designed to make your life easier. It was designed to make your thinking more accurate. Those are two very different things. A highly intelligent mind processes more input, holds more variables, and refuses to settle for the easy answer. And when that kind of mind lives inside a world built for average processing speed, friction happens. That friction shows up as behavior. Behavior other people don't understand. So before we get into the list, remember this one sentence, because it's going to matter later. What looks broken from the outside is often just a mind working correctly under conditions it wasn't built for. Habit 1. She thinks out loud. You're pacing your kitchen, working through a problem, and suddenly you're mid-sentence, talking to no one. You catch yourself and feel a flash of embarrassment, like you got caught doing something you shouldn't. Here's what's actually happening in that moment. Psychologist Lev Vygotsky spent years studying what he called private speech, the process of turning raw, chaotic thought into structured language before it becomes action. He found that children do this constantly as they learn to solve problems, and that a portion of adults never stop doing it. They just do it quietly, or they've been shamed into hiding it. Think of it like this. Your mind holds a dozen half-formed thoughts, all colliding at once. Speaking forces you to line them up, one behind the other, in a sentence. It's not chaos leaking out. It's chaos being organized in real time. So the next time you catch yourself narrating your own thinking out loud, that's not a red flag. That's your brain doing exactly what it's supposed to do when it's carrying too much to process silently. And if that one felt familiar, wait until you hear what's happening every time you can't fall asleep before midnight. Habit 2. The 1 a.m. mind. You've heard it your entire life. Successful people wake up early. 5 a.m. clubs, sunrise routines, and if you're a night owl, you've probably absorbed the quiet message that something is wrong with you, that you're lazy, undisciplined, wasting your mornings. But here's what the research actually says. Multiple studies on chronotypes, a person's natural sleep-wake tendency, have found a consistent pattern. People who score higher on certain reasoning and verbal intelligence measures are disproportionately likely to be night owls, not early birds. Why would that be? Think about what actually happens after midnight. The emails stop. The group chats go quiet. Nobody needs anything from you. For a mind that's been interrupted all day by meetings, notifications, other people's emotions, that silence isn't wasted time. It's the only time. That's when the real thinking happens. Not the reactive thinking you do all day, but the slow, connective thinking that produces your best ideas. The night doesn't make her a night owl by accident. Her brain simply does its best work when nothing else is asking for its attention. But here's where it gets interesting, because the space she works in during the day tells its own story. Habit 3. The beautiful mess picture. A desk covered in papers, sticky notes with no obvious order, a bag that hasn't been cleaned out in a month. To most people, that looks like someone who's falling behind. But a well-known study out of the University of Minnesota tested this directly. Researchers put people in either a clean, organized room or a messy, cluttered one, then asked them to come up with new uses for a common object. The people in the messy room consistently generated more original, more creative ideas than the people in the tidy one. The theory is simple. An orderly environment nudges your brain toward conventional thinking. A disordered one nudges it toward breaking rules, including the unwritten rule that things need to look neat to be under control. Here's the detail that matters most, though. Ask her to find something in that mess, and she'll put her hand on it in under 5 seconds. There's a map in her head that nobody else can read. The chaos isn't a lack of order. It's an order built entirely for her own mind. And honestly, that's usually the most efficient kind there is. Now, habits 1 through 3 all happen when she's completely alone. But what happens when this same mind has to deal with other people? That's where things get a lot more complicated. Habit 4. Solitude that isn't loneliness. She cancels plans and means it. She'd rather spend Friday night alone with a book than at a crowded happy hour. And somewhere along the way, people started calling her cold, distant, hard to reach. Here's the distinction almost nobody makes. There's a massive difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is wanting connection and not having it. Solitude is choosing to be alone because your own mind is genuinely enough company. Psychologist Hans Eysenck proposed something called the arousal theory of introversion. The idea that some people have a higher baseline level of internal mental stimulation. Their brains are already running hot, so to speak, which means they need less external stimulation to feel satisfied, and too much of it, small talk, crowded rooms, constant noise, actually starts to feel draining rather than energizing. So when she picks one deep conversation over an entire night of surface-level chatter, that's not antisocial behavior. That's a brain protecting its own limited bandwidth, the same way you'd protect your phone battery on a long trip with no charger in sight. If you've ever been called too quiet at a party you didn't even want to be at, this one's for you. Habit 5. She forgets everything small. She walks into a room and forgets why. She loses her keys weekly. She's had her glasses on her head while searching the entire house for them. And every time somebody laughs and says, "How do you forget that?" Here's the answer psychology actually gives us. Cognitive load theory tells us that working memory, the mental space you use to hold information right now, is extremely limited. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are. Everyone has a ceiling. So when a mind is actively holding 5 or 6 complex, high-stakes threads, a work problem, a relationship conversation, a half-finished idea, it will automatically deprioritize low-stakes information, where the keys are, what you walked into the room for. That's not a malfunction. That's your brain making a trade you didn't consciously authorize, sacrificing the trivial to protect the important. It's not memory loss. It's memory triage, and it happens to some of the sharpest minds you'll ever meet. Now here's a habit that looks completely different on the surface, but comes from the exact same root. Habit 6. She never just accepts the answer. That's just how it's always been done, has never once been a satisfying answer to her. Not at work, not in relationships, not in casual conversation. And for a woman specifically, that habit gets punished more than most people realize. She gets called difficult, stubborn, exhausting to deal with, but refusing to accept an explanation just because it's familiar, just because everyone else nodded along, that's one of the clearest behavioral markers researchers associate with independent, high-level reasoning. It means her brain runs new information through its own internal logic before filing it away as true. The uncomfortable truth is this. The people most annoyed by her questions are usually the ones who never actually had a good answer to begin with. They just never got asked before. And speaking of things people don't expect from her, wait until you hear what happens when she tries to make a joke. Habit 7. The joke that lands 3 steps ahead. She says something clever, layered, a little dark, a little ironic, and gets nothing back but a confused smile. Understanding sarcasm and layered humor requires your brain to hold 2 things in mind simultaneously, what was literally said and what was actually meant, and then process the gap between them fast enough for it to feel funny instead of confusing. That's a genuinely heavy cognitive task, even though it happens in a split second. Her humor isn't missing the mark. It's landing exactly where she aimed. It's just that most people's brains are still processing the literal sentence by the time she's already 3 layers deep. That disconnect can feel isolating. But here's the part that actually matters more than any joke ever could. Habit 8, the replay loop. This is the one almost nobody admits to out loud, so let's just say it plainly. She sends a 2-line email, and 3 days later, she's still replaying it in her head. Did that sound rude? Too cold? Did she say too much? Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman's research on decision-making described 2 systems of thinking, a fast, automatic one, and a slow, deliberate, effortful one. Highly analytical minds tend to default to that second system far more often than average, even in situations that don't strictly require it. It's exhausting, but it's also precise. It's the same mechanism that catches errors other people walk right past. Add in the extra scrutiny women in particular face over how they say things, not just what they say, and you get a mind that runs the tape back constantly, looking for a mistake that, more often than not, was never actually there. If this is you, you're not insecure. You're just carrying a system built for precision into moments that never asked for that much of it. There are 2 more habits left, and the next one might be the most misunderstood of all 10. Habit 9. She waits too long to start. She's sitting on a task she is completely capable of finishing well, and somehow she hasn't started. People call it laziness. It's the opposite. She can already picture, in vivid detail, exactly how good the finished version could be. And the gap between that vision and whatever a rough first attempt would look like feels too wide to step into. So she waits. Refines it silently in her head, sometimes for days. This isn't a discipline problem. It's a standards problem. The same mind that can see the ideal outcome with painful clarity is the mind that struggles the most to accept an imperfect starting point, even though starting imperfectly is the only way anything ever actually gets built. Habit 10. She disappears mid-conversation. You're talking to her at dinner. She's nodding, making all the right sounds, and she's not really there. Neuroscientists call this the default mode network, a system in the brain that activates specifically when you're not focused on the outside world. And in people who consistently generate original ideas, that network tends to be unusually active. It's constantly connecting distant concepts in the background, whether she gives it permission to or not. She's not ignoring you. Her brain simply found something more interesting mid-sentence, and it happens whether she wants it to or not. So here's 10 habits, 10 things the world has quietly taught women to apologize for. Talking to yourself, staying up too late, a messy desk, needing to be alone, forgetting the small things, asking too many questions, jokes that land wrong, replaying every word, waiting too long to start, drifting away mid-conversation. None of these are malfunctions. Every single one is what a mind running at a higher resolution looks like from the outside. Noticing more, connecting more, and needing more depth than most environments are built to offer. If even one of these felt uncomfortably close to home, that wasn't a coincidence. That was recognition. So tell me, which number hit the hardest? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this actually helped you see yourself a little differently today, subscribe. Because next week we're going even deeper into the minds most people never get to see.